Well, it's Room 442 for another week. Albert, Sarah, Mikey, and James here with you. Yes, we'll get to the World Cup later in today's show. And, of course, it's the end of the Champions League group phase. We'll do a rapid fire for Tuesday's games, but to start with the headlines making the news this day. And, oh, Sarah, you love this one. Your boy Leo Messi, back in the news. It is everywhere. The Star, very reputable. Not the Shining Star, by the way, but the Star. Lionel Messi expected to join Inter Miami on free transfer when PSG contract ends. Now, it was Barcelona before. Then he was staying at PSG. Then he was going who knows where. Now it's back to Inter Miami. Do you believe these rumors? I mean, Fabrizio Romano is reporting it, which means something, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think people are talking about it, but we've said this before, nothing is going to be determined until after the World Cup. This is all speculation. Everyone's making money on it. Everyone knows they want to talk about Messi. So people are going to talk about it, and that's fine. But we're not going to know anything until after the World Cup. So for me, I'm like, great, another Messi story. You know what? Played great over the weekend. Another goal, another assist, by the way, I called that. And so my focus is, okay, he's playing well, he's doing well. Let's get to the World Cup. Let's see how they do. And right now, like, leave all the rumors in the dust.
You seem a bit agitated. You know,
yeah, because I don't think Messi should, drop to the MLS, to be quite frank. I don't see him as a player. I think it was me and you having this conversation. Unlike Ronaldo, who will play until he can't even walk. Messi is more so the player where if he's not contributing enough to his team, I don't think he would play. So for me, I would see him retiring a little bit before Ronaldo with his age and kind of just being like, I'm fine with doing this. Going to the MLS, I don't know. It seems like a bit of a reach. I'm not really, I just don't want to see him finishing there. But I know with Suarez and Miami linked up too, they're besties. It makes a lot of sense, but
Mikey, you going to sit there and listen to her just rip MLS? Or?
I'm used to it by now. Hey, the American dream, is that what they call it? All these stars from Europe, we know the allure of coming over to the States, living in a place like Miami, putting your feet up, getting paid an enormous amount of money, and playing soccer. You're still playing at a reasonably high level. It may not be overseas, but there's a lot of opportunities, let's say, that comes with playing in Major League Soccer. And I think when you get to this point of your career, where you're probably not gonna play in another World Cup after this one, your career's starting to wind down. You have to start.
But is his career winding down? Because we're seeing him wind right back up.
I mean, how much longer do you see Messi playing?
Oh, I'm not gonna assume anything, but I mean, right now he's playing way better than he did last season.
Do you think he'll play in another World Cup?
Oh, not a World Cup, but I think he could still provide.
That's 4 years, right?
Yeah, so
it's starting to wind down.
Well, but he could still stay in Europe for like at least a couple more.
He could, but you have to start thinking about what's next. And I think getting a lot of money, a lot of sponsorships, you're living in Miami, which is a completely different lifestyle than what you've been accustomed to. I think there is something there.
Yeah, financially, it makes a lot of sense for Messi. He's obviously the flavor of the month right now, but he's got that huge deal with Adidas. The MLS have a huge deal with Adidas as well. They just added a contract extension, I think, a couple of years ago. So you have that, and then he's just going over there and potentially, taking over a stake in ownership. I think 6 months ago, right? They said Messi might be going over there and taking 35%. So I think it's a bigger play than football. I think this
Apple
sets him
TV
up,
too.
Yeah, financially, right? And he can build his brand in North America.
So Inter will be this club just owned by all these megastar footballers, right? You know, a little bit of Beckham here, a little bit of Messi here, be a little bit of Erling Haaland one day there as well. You know, it's going to be a weird mix there.
Phil Neville.
Yeah, with Phil Neville coaching. Yeah, exactly. One of these things is not like the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Moving on now, the Daily Mirror, another very reputable tabloid. Something's not right. This is about Liverpool. Their loss sparks fierce new big debate as Reds told how to end alarming slump in form. Another huge loss against Leeds this time around.
Yes.
I got that one.
You did, yeah. No, you crushed it on Friday. It's something else. You beat Man City and then you lose to Nottingham Forest and Leeds. It's Napoli on Tuesday. What's happening here? I've tried to make sense of it. That there's many issues, I think. One of which is a midfield that was supposed to be Henderson, Fabinho, and Thiago. It hasn't really ever gelled. Always been hurt. Now they're getting older. There's that issue. Defensively, Van Dijk is a shell of his former self. Joe Gomez, who shows flashes of brilliance, and then gives the ball away like we saw this past weekend. I mean, there's so many issues here, but it's more. It is more than just a slump, I think, at this point.
Well, I mean, there's so many players out of form, so many important players. Like you mentioned, Fabinho is uncharacteristically bad. Virgil van Dijk, Andy Robertson, Trent, week in and week out. I know we pick on him a little bit, but he's been terrible. Joe Gomez, you don't know where you're going to get from him. So having that many players out of form is going to affect the team, plus the injuries. Rotation doesn't exist really for Klopp. He has to keep playing these players because of those injuries. But I also noticed at the beginning of games is the real issue. In their last 9 games dating back to May, they've conceded the first goal in the opening 16 minutes. That's a problem, right? That's more than being out of form. That's just the team not being ready. And maybe it has to do with the injuries and the players being out of form. But, man, how do you fix it? I don't know.
I'd love to bring up a point I don't think people are talking about enough. How much is this team missing Sadio Mane?
This is what I said in my rapid fire.
How much is this team missing Sadio Mane?
I get
No,
that.
what's
And I
he-
keep hearing that too. But defensively,
But
they're
Sadio Mane was
getting
so
scored on more than they
good.
have before.
He was so good. You mentioned them conceding early.
Yeah.
He was so good at finding the back of the net
course,
early.
yeah.
And he did a lot more for this team than just score goals. It was his movement, his ability to cover ground. He made them tougher to play against starting from the top.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this team and I'm like, up top, are they really that tough to play against?
Well, there's injuries now, right? Jota,
Yeah,
right,
Jota.
out. Diaz
Luis
now.
Diaz.
It's
huge
very
loss.
unfortunate.
Yeah.
Those guys, I think, would have replaced Mane eventually. One of them, if not both of them. And you're right, Mane's been fantastic, and he means a lot to that team and that fan base. But they did address that. He wanted out. Right? It's not like they said we've had enough of this guy. He wanted out. He
Sure.
moved out. People are whining about the ownership now, FSG, and saying they haven't committed enough money to this. Listen, they spent money on this team, on this squad. Mo Salah's still there for that very reason. They're improving the stadium. Can they spend more money? Yes, of course. And there is going to be a big transition at some point. But to say that they haven't done the job that they've been brought in to do, I think is very unfair as well. That's a bit much. I understand fans get finicky and upset and want to point fingers, and they can't do it at Klopp because it's the great Jurgen Klopp, right?
Yeah.
You can't do it at a lot of those players who have won them so much in the last number of years. So let's point fingers at the Americans. It's a bit much. Speaking of Americans, here's one for you. Marker, LAFC reaches MLS Cup final for the first time with Gareth Bale in oblivion. They're in the final up against Philly, Mikey, and Bale once again didn't see the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've talked about in the past, and with the World Cup around the corner, how many minutes is Gareth Bale really going to get with LAFC? In my opinion, I think he should have gotten sub minutes because I don't think you want to go into a World Cup without playing very much football. Apparently, he has an injury, so that's something to keep an eye on for
Tends
Wales
to always
fans.
have an injury before big tournaments.
And that's the
I'm
thing.
telling
too.
you, it's an ongoing thing with Gareth Bale.
But at the,
Yeah, go ahead. sorry.
At the same time, I actually think LAFC could be a better team without Gareth Bale. You know, before Bale arrived in Chiellini, they were at the top of the league. And then when
They were luxury signings.
they were luxury signings,
Right.
exactly. And I think the core of this team, which is built up of, mainly domestic players, if you include Mexico and the States, I think they're better than when you add Bale into the mix. It kind of throws off their dynamic.
Yeah, and what's frustrating, I'm sure, for LAFC players as well, is they just clinch a spot in the final, and the headline is about Gareth Bale.
Yeah, must drive them up the wall. Give Steve Cherundolo a lot of credit. First season as a head coach, got to the final against Philly. We'll talk about that later.
He was the
in
guy
the
Toronto
week.
FC interviewed back when they were doing the Chris Armas hunt, when they were trying to replace Vanny.
I think he made the right choice, Cherundolo, and TFC did not make the right choice. We should mention, by the way, Forge wins the CPL Shield, beat Ottawa in Ottawa on Sunday night. Bobby Smirniatis has done a great job. That's 3 championships now in 4 years. They are very much a dynasty, and we'll definitely get into them a little bit later this week as well, because that was a great performance on the road in the big match, and I thought it was superb. Very quickly, I want to go over your headlines from Friday. Sarah, you mentioned something about Messi doing well this weekend. He did it. Check. Well done. Well done. Albert, Marsh, end of the Ellen Road. Again, 2 weeks in a row, you called out Jesse
I'm
Marsh.
Jesse Marsh's good luck charm. I gotta just
You are.
keep every single week. You won't get fired.
Mikey, as mentioned, odds on Klopp sack to go up. And yep, what are they right now?
Plus 700.
Wow, there you go.
They jumped up.
I had Ronaldo stakes his claim to move away. He started on the weekend, played okay. United beat West Ham. Things are going well there. So, we're all pretty good apart from Albert, I think. We pretty much crushed our crystal ball watching turned out pretty well. All right, we're out of time for this block. When we come back, though, it is rapid fire. Yes, Champions League wraps up the group phase this week.